Hello, we've got a lot to talk about today. As you know, I'm writing an opera and I'm working with the Gulbenkian Foundation in Lisbon and with enoa, which is the European network of opera academies. The first meeting we had with the Gulbenkian Foundation was online and it was in September. Morning. I'm very tired. Today I have an online meeting with the Deputy Director of the Gulbenkian Foundation in Portugal. It's online, which means I don't have to move from this bed. I have brushed my teeth, by the way. I just didn't film that. It's also going to be the librettist and the scenographer in this meeting, and we're going to talk about the opera. I keep having this recurring dream. It's like an existential crisis in a dream. I'll just move you now. That'll do. It's 4 minutes until the meeting, so I guess I'm logging in because I'm not risking things. Oh, I've accidentally left the meeting. The Gulbenkian Foundation have asked that the meetings be private, which is fine. I accept that. I'll just talk about briefly what was discussed in terms of the creative side of the opera, what I'm intending to write, what the librettist is intending to write, and how I'm working with that, and what the scenographer is intended to do. I'm not going to discuss anything else discussed by the Gulbenkian Foundation. That's the disclaimer. So the first meeting was basically them figuring out what our opera was going to be about. So we ended up discussing the project as a whole, which I found quite useful because it provided a very good summary of what we intended to do, which is good for me, sort of get my ideas centred in one place, especially before I started writing the piece. We've identified a narrative structure for the whole thing. Georges calls it, he says he's half calling it a Pinocchio-style narrative, because the hero meets a whole bunch of different characters, and by meeting these characters, the protagonist keeps asking, who am I? It's not going to be a documentary style piece, but it will be strongly fueled by real life stories. It's going to be a very real narrative in that sense, even though it's going to be a piece of fiction. Then I was asked to talk about the music, and I'll just include that clip here. In terms of the music, I could explore frequency just freely, but people would hear styles in it. They would hear something and think, oh, that sounds tonal, or that sounds atonal, and then these two things would be compared with each other, and then a boundary is put in place, and then it stands out. It almost jars with the listener because they think it should be this or it should be that. We could have two perspectives in the music. You go to the opera, you expect to hear an opera, and you hear an opera, and it's very regimented and very precise and neat, but then you have another perspective. It could be sounded through headphones, or it could be spatialized, and we would have other music that isn't as conventional, and it contradicts with what people expect to hear from an opera, but also complements it and offers a different perspective. But also these two perspectives can shift. You could have that perspective as the main part of the narrative. If, say, the protagonist is encountering a different lifestyle, the music can be freer and people are experiencing life as they want to live it. But then again, listeners are imposing boundaries all the time on the music, just like the protagonist is having boundaries put upon them all the time. The person leading the meeting said something very interesting, which I think is relevant here. It did get me thinking more, and it is kind of how I'm thinking about it as well, so I'm going to include it. They said you are inside the system that you want to resist, so you can't really escape it, no matter what you do, because everything you do is fueled by the system that you're in. And I think that's a crucial point of this opera. Every act of trying to not be defined by anything is coming from within a system that is inherently based on definitions. It's a massive paradox the more you think about it, and in some ways I wonder if it's pointless. In that way, it's kind of freeing to realise that it's pointless and naively just exploring things regardless of the knowledge of any boundaries or a system is kind of maybe the closest you can get to breaking the system. even though we're imbued with it. I'm talking too abstractly about this, I know I am. An opera is a really good way of doing it actually, because it's imbued with all these boundaries and systems, and even the nature of the opera itself is such an elitist thing that it seems cordoned off from society today. I know I need to explain this a bit better with examples, which I will do. This is kind of just like a get me thoughts out video. So Rachel and her scenography. For her, the tension of the drama that we are looking to communicate is really about when you start seeing the system a bit more and kind of going, okay, what other kinds of ways of weathering are existing within the system can I practice? It's about this kind of tension between two different kinds of system. One which is maybe rigid and static and fixed, and then one which is where the edges of things are very ill-defined. And so she wants to do this visually with smoke and mist. That's one technique of having ill-defined boundaries. And the mist itself and the lighting going out into the audience as well. Oh, she has this other idea which I think is really interesting. Certain characters at certain points gain this kind of ability where they're able to step out of their costume and their costume remains in the place where they were previously. And people are still interacting with their costume as if they're still there. I like that. Visually it makes a big statement. Okay, and then we discussed what kind of performance space the opera would be in. Like the hall, the staging, would it be conventional theatre, or would it be something a bit more modern, like a black box theatre or something? We could do it in a conventional space, and that's how it's been storyboarded, and we've planned it starting out in a conventional space. We want it to start conventionally and then kind of break down. You got to go to the opera thinking you're going to a traditional opera. There's a kind of formal structure at the start, and then that starts to evolve and actually become part of a party at one point. It's like the characters come out of the stage and blend into the audience, and there's these boundaries between audience and stage that are other boundaries that we can break. So we have to start with the system, the conventional established system. So starting with a conventional theatre setup, I think, is best, and then breaking it somehow. At least the first act will be structured in quite a conventional way. If audiences arrive to the theatre, they are going to see an opera according to their conventions. But then even the space starts deteriorating. And so the opera is going to be composed musically in this way as well. So it's going to start off sounding quite classical, not pastiche for sure. It's going to sound like me. I'm not writing pastiche, but it's going to sound quite tame. It's going to explore harmony in a way that people are used to. You know, balanced rhythms, musical foreshadowing, things like that, which I can discuss later. But then there's this pivotal point where things start breaking down and the music starts changing, and we have other illusions in it, which I'll talk about when I talk about the music. We quote the Spice Girls. And then as the opera goes on, it becomes a bit more, for want of a better word, just wild. I think that's what we're doing for now. I mean, things are always subject to change. We also discussed in the first meeting what we'd want to workshop in our lab, and this is the lab we're going to be doing in Lisbon shortly. I'll be going there on Sunday. And so the two things that we would want to explore are, as George put it, there's the human side and the technical electronic side. So we have this idea we want to explore trans voices in the opera, but also the electronic technical side. We're having this, the headphones, you can hear all the music through the headphones. We don't know how that's going to work, so we need to experiment with that, basically. And then at the end of that video, I summarised what was discussed, so I'll end this by taking you back to the me from the past, just to summarise the meeting, and then we can talk about the music. Okay, just had the meeting. We're basically working with audience's expectations and trying to usurp them. Rachel mentioned the idea of the costumes, someone stepping out of the costume but people still reacting to their old costume, as if they're in it. I like that, because I've been thinking about memory and things repeating and echoes and things. Say if you had a voice looper, how you can have a thought and sing something or think something and that repeats even though maybe you don't think it anymore. Because once you repeat something, every repeat is not the same because time has changed and it has a different perspective. Okay, see you in the next video where I'll talk about the music, which I'll probably look exactly the same as I do now. Bye!